In the ruins of a once glorious cinema industry, Italy dared to imagine worlds after the end. These films were raw, violent, and eerily prophetic. Before Hollywood ruled the wasteland, Italian filmmakers turned apocalypse into art. But what made them so shocking that even censors recoiled? Tonight, we descend into 10 Italian post-apocalypse films that electrified the world and burned their way into legend. Number 10, 1990, The Bronx Warriors, 1982. When Enzo G. Castellari released this chaotic blend of punk anarchy and American bravado, audiences did not know whether to cheer or run. Set in a near-future New York abandoned by the government, the Bronx becomes a war zone, ruled by leather-clad gangs and flame-throwing bikers. The hero named Trash leads a doomed rebellion through neon smoke and graffiti wastelands. The film looked like a Hollywood blockbuster made with scrapyard money. Critics called it both trashy and visionary. Italian censors bristled at its violence, while American distributors accused it of plagiarizing Escape from New York. Castellari claimed he never saw Carpenter's film, but the coincidences were too eerie to ignore. Behind the scenes, the stunts were real and brutal. Bikers crashed through real fire. Extras fainted from heat and smoke. Production ran out of film stock mid-shoot, forcing the crew to scavenge expired reels. Yet somehow the result glowed with manic energy. Audiences abroad devoured it. Bootleg copies flooded video stores in Britain and Germany. Years later, Quentin Tarantino declared it one of his guilty pleasures. What was once derided as a knockoff now stands as a time capsule of post-industrial fear when the Bronx symbolized civilization's collapse and youth rebellion burned brighter than hope. Number 9, 2019. After the Fall of New York, 1983. Sergio Martino's vision of a scorched America was pure Italian madness disguised as science fiction. The story begins years after a nuclear holocaust, when the planet is barren and fertility has vanished. The last fertile woman becomes the prize in a violent race across ruined cities. Enter Parsifal, a lone mercenary guided by destiny through deserts of ash and twisted metal. The movie fused Mad Max with Greek myth. Critics mocked it as overblown, but Martino filled every frame with symbolic decay. Soldiers wore melted armor, rats feasted on skyscrapers. Even the hero's car looked stitched together from fallen empires. Censors objected to its brutality and nihilism. The Vatican condemned its moral collapse. American distributors cut entire scenes fearing backlash, but bootlegs survived uncensored in European grindhouses, where cult audiences hailed its raw audacity. Behind the camera, chaos reigned. Sets built from abandoned industrial plants collapsed mid-shoot. Crew members fell ill from toxic dust. Martino later admitted he feared for his actors' lives, but kept filming because the apocalypse must look real. In later years, the film earned respect for predicting fears of genetic extinction and environmental doom. What once looked like pulp now feels like prophecy. Its closing line still chills viewers to the bone. Man is not extinct yet, but he deserves to be. Number 8. The New Barbarians, 1983. Enzo G. Castellari returned to the wasteland, but this time he made it shine like chrome in the sun. The New Barbarians was set in the year 2019, after a nuclear war wiped out most of humanity. The survivors were hunted by a death cult called the Templars, who believed cleansing the world meant killing anyone still breathing. The film was an unapologetic spectacle of fire explosions and armored cars built from scraps of Fiat and Alfa Romeo parts. It looked cheap, but felt dangerous. Critics accused Castellari of copying Mad Max, but his vision was stranger and more spiritual. The Templars were not just villains. They were monks of doom who preached salvation through extermination. Censors in Italy demanded edits to the film's gruesome impalements and fiery deaths, but even the censored cut shocked audiences with its nihilism. The Vatican's film office publicly criticized its religious blasphemy in metallic form. Behind the scenes, stunt coordinator Massimo Vanni nearly died during a car flip gone wrong. Gasoline splashed over the set during one explosion, forcing the cast to flee through real fire. Yet Castellari refused to tone anything down. He wanted the apocalypse to feel tactile, to hurt to singe your eyelashes. Years later, cult audiences embraced it as art through destruction. The costumes inspired cyberpunk fashion designers, and the film's minimalist synth soundtrack became a vinyl collector's gem. What began as imitation now feels like revelation, proof that even in ruins, Italians could find beauty in annihilation. Number 7. Endgame Bronx. Lotta Finale, 1983. Joe D'Amato, famous for his reckless energy, turned dystopia into delirium with Endgame Bronx Lotta Finale. The film mixed gladiator battles, radiation mutants, and psychic powers into a nightmare vision of a broken New York. It followed Ron Shannon, a televised warrior, forced to fight for survival while escorting a group of telepaths to safety. At first, critics laughed at its absurdity, but there was something haunting beneath the madness. Endgame predicted televised death sports decades before the Hunger Games. D'Amato's lens captured a future where entertainment fed on human misery. Italian authorities nearly banned it over scenes of torture and gunplay filmed in real industrial ruins. Television executives called it an insult to humanity. But the director defended it as a parable about media addiction and the loss of empathy. Behind the scenes, chaos ruled. Extras were recruited from real biker gangs in Rome. They demanded beer instead of wages and started unscripted fights on set. The production nearly collapsed after one explosion, injured the cameraman. Still, D'Amato filmed through smoke and blood, refusing to cut. Though dismissed in its day, the film gained cult reverence for predicting corporate-sponsored violence. Its tagline, "The game never ends," feels more prophetic with each passing decade. What began as a grindhouse curiosity now stands as a mirror to our own appetite for televised brutality. Number 6. Exterminators of the Year. 3000, 1983. Set in a radioactive desert that looked suspiciously like southern Spain, this film by Giuliano Carnemeo turned scavengers and car chases into poetry of despair. The story followed a lone survivor who teams up with a child and a mechanic to fight a brutal water-hoarding gang. At release, it was marketed as Italy's answer to Mad Max 2, but Carnemeo's version had more heart and less heroism. The characters were broken people, not warriors. Their vehicles rattled like dying animals. Every frame screamed scarcity. The Italian Board of Censors forced heavy cuts for extreme violence. Even so, audiences gasped at its bleak tone. No one smiled, no one triumphed, just dust, wind, and blood. American distributors released a heavily edited VHS, but underground screenings kept the uncut version alive. Behind the scenes, temperatures soared past 40 degrees Celsius. Cast and crew fainted under the sun. Real gasoline was poured into real fires. The cinematographer later said the heat distorted the film stock, giving the desert its surreal glow, a mistake that became its signature. Decades later, fans rediscovered it through Blu-ray restorations, calling it one of the purest apocalyptic visions ever shot on Italian soil. Its dusty moral remains timeless. When everything burns, the fight for a drop of water becomes the fight for your soul. Number 5. Warriors of the Wasteland, 1984. When Enzo G. Castellari made Warriors of the Wasteland, he pushed his obsession with steel and silence to divine extremes. The film imagined a world erased by nuclear fire, where armored nomads roam highways, ruled by a sadistic tyrant called One. The hero Scorpion drove a weaponized dune buggy, armed with crossbows and homemade rockets. His battles were balletic explosions of chrome and sunlight. Though critics mocked it as derivative, Castellari infused each chase with operatic grandeur. The Italian government briefly halted its release, citing excessive violence. Religious groups protested its depiction of humans as soulless machines, but underground audiences adored it. Bootlegs passed hand to hand like relics of forbidden prophecy. The production itself was near-apocalyptic. Sets collapsed from heat. Gas explosions melted props. Castellari's brother, who handled stunts, broke 2 ribs. Still, they shot through agony. The crew later joked that the world really had ended somewhere between takes. Though forgotten by the mainstream, the film gained new life in retrospectives of European dystopian cinema. Its stark imagery, the sun-bleached horizon, the echo of engines and silence, became an icon for retro-futurist art. Castellari's Wasteland was never about survival. It was about loneliness and the beauty of endurance in a dying world. Number 4. 2020 Texas Gladiators, 1983. Helmed by Joe D'Amato and Luigi Montefiore, This chaotic production was shot in Italy, but set in a destroyed America. The story followed ex-soldiers turned resistance fighters battling a fascist militia that controls the last oil refinery. Audiences expecting another car chase adventure got something darker. The film combined religious fanaticism, political tyranny, and grotesque experiments on survivors. The imagery shocked even seasoned grindhouse fans. Censors slashed entire sequences. One Italian newspaper called it too violent for television and too dumb for theaters. Yet its VHS release across Europe found an eager audience hungry for rebellion. Behind the scenes, the film nearly imploded. Two directors clashed constantly. D'Amato wanted an action movie while Montefiore aimed for biblical allegory. They compromised by shooting both visions at once. Actors performed scenes without clear direction, not knowing if they were saints or soldiers. Though chaotic, the film captured a powerful truth about authoritarianism and faith. Long dismissed as schlock, it has since been reappraised as a surreal vision of humanity repeating its mistakes in the rubble. Its closing shot, a man walking alone into a red sunrise, remains one of Italian cinema's most haunting final images. Number 3. The Last Warrior, 1984, directed by David Worth, but financed through Italian studios. The Last Warrior blurred borders and languages in a global apocalypse. The film followed a soldier wandering through the radioactive wastelands of California after a nuclear holocaust. Critics found it uneven, but its ambition was undeniable. Worth mixed Italian aesthetics with American landscapes, crafting a hybrid tone, half spaghetti western, half fever dream. When released in Italy, it faced confusion and outrage. Local censors condemned it for depicting military corruption and for showing Western civilization as the true villain. Television networks refused to air it, calling it unpatriotic. On set, the heat warped the film reels. Actors dubbed themselves in multiple languages. Equipment broke constantly. But the struggle gave it authenticity, the feeling of a movie barely surviving its own apocalypse. Over time, The Last Warrior became a secret favorite of genre historians who saw in it the bridge between European surrealism and American exploitation. Its influence echoes in modern post-apocalypse films that blend cultures and tones. It stands as proof that the end of the world has no nationality, only dust. Number 2. Rat's Night of Terror, 1984. Bruno Mattei, known for his outrageous B-movies, unleashed this claustrophobic nightmare about survivors living in a post-nuclear wasteland overrun by mutant rats. The premise was simple, yet horrifying. Human arrogance meets nature's revenge. At its premiere, audiences screamed both in terror and laughter. Critics called it grotesque genius. But Italian authorities weren't amused. Animal rights groups protested the use of live rats, while censors demanded scenes be cut for cruelty and gore. Behind the camera, chaos and fear ruled. Thousands of real rats were dumped on set. Actors refused to sleep near the filming area. Mattei famously said, "Fear makes better performances." The cast hated him, but the footage glowed with genuine panic. The film's low budget forced creativity. Sewers were built from cardboard. Explosions were shot in slow motion to stretch footage. Yet it somehow felt epic, a meditation on humanity's last hours surrounded by the creatures it once poisoned. For decades, Rat's Night of Terror was ridiculed, then rediscovered by horror scholars as eco-apocalypse prophecy. In a world facing climate disaster and pestilence, its madness suddenly makes sense. It's not just rats that survive. It's the memory of our arrogance crawling through the ruins. Number 1. The Aftermath, 1982. Though technically co-produced with the United States, it carried Italy's fingerprints all over, raw, desperate, and fearless. Directed by Steve Barkett and partly financed by Italian investors, the film told the story of two astronauts returning to Earth after nuclear devastation. They land in Los Angeles, only to find society reduced to savagery. The movie was small but haunting. Shot in abandoned California suburbs, it felt eerily real. The silence of empty streets, the burnt-out cars, the skeletal skyline. It all mirrored Europe's own Cold War anxieties. Critics dismissed it as derivative, but Barkett's film became a cult treasure on European television. Italian distributors pushed it as the apocalypse that speaks every language. When the American version was censored for its despairing tone, Italian prints kept the bleakness intact. Production was a miracle of survival. Barkett mortgaged his home. Crew members worked for food. Scenes were shot guerrilla style without permits. Police interrupted several takes thinking the bodies on the ground were real casualties. The aftermath remains an ode to endurance, a film made by people living on cinematic fumes. In its final moments, the lone survivor walks toward a crimson sunset, carrying a child through radioactive haze. That image of hope and ruin defined the Italian post-apocalyptic dream, gritty, heartfelt, and eternal. From burning deserts to shattered cities, these Italian visions of the end dared to turn despair into poetry. They warned that civilization's collapse might look stylish but feel real. Perhaps that is why they still echo today. Which film left you haunted or inspired? Tell us below. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more journeys through forgotten cinematic ruins.